in your nursing. Um, but many a time what happens is we fail to make it into practical, or it will be too theoretical. We don't know what uh, we have to, when we study something, we don't know how to put it into practice. So uh, today we are going to look at some basic aspects of communication, and I'm happy to introduce today's faculty to you, Dr. Biju Raghavan, who is one of the best friends of mine, and he has done his diploma in pain and palliative medicine, and he has been working in pain and palliative medicine for more than 16 years. Right now, he is working as consultant and head of the Department of Palliative Medicine at Category Hospital, Aliva. He has been helping us in conducting various courses, and he has a very special interest in doing communication sessions. And I welcome Biju, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Sunil. Good to see you. I hope you are well. Uh, and Thank you for the kind introduction. It's always a pleasure uh, being associated with Pallium India. Uh, and welcome to all those who are logging in from various parts of the world for today's session. Thank you for your presence. And if Rajlakshmi is all set to go, I would request Rajlakshmi to share the screen from your end. Okay, yeah, here we go. Thank you. So we'll start today's session. As I said, welcome everybody to today's program on communication skills. We are doing this in two parts. So first part is today. Can we go back? First part is today, and the next part will be next Monday, which is on 12th. So today we will be just talking about some of the basic parts of communication, and next week we will look into some specific areas. So this is the hospital I'm working in. It is in the middle part of Kerala. Kerala is a small state in southern part of India. For those who are from outside India, just to give you a perspective of where we are from. And now we can get on to the uh, presentation. Can we have the next slide, please? All right. So today we hope to cover some importance of communication skills and what role it plays in our professional life. And we will be talking about some barriers to communication. What are the things that can prevent good communication from happening? And then we will also touch upon some do's and don'ts, some of the things that will help you in your practical day-to-day professional life, some of the things that if you put it in practice will help, and then how to conduct a clinical history taking, how to conduct an interview. We all have learned history taking from our undergraduate days in medicine or nursing. We all know how to take a history, but maybe I hope to improve upon it. So this is what I hope to cover in today's session. So can we move on to the next slide, please? So why is healthcare communication challenging? We all know that it's very difficult sometimes. Uh, the reason being, people don't come to us because they are happy to come to us. They come to us because they are sick, they are in pain, they are suffering, and that is why they have to come to us. Unlike, you know, if when we decide to go for a movie or a picnic or an outing, we have a choice. If we are in the right frame of mind, if we are happy, we will go. If we are not in the mood, we may not go. But when we are sick, when we are suffering, we have to go to the hospital, we have to meet the healthcare professionals there. So the starting point itself is negative, and that is where the challenge begins with. Another thing is, we may be doing a great job as far as providing medical care is concerned. However, if the patient or the family is not satisfied, if our skills is not satisfactory, then uh, well, the output will be not as much as we would expect. So where does the satisfaction comes in? We may be providing them the best medical care, the best of the nursing care. However, if the communication skills are not up to mark, the sense of satisfaction doesn't come in. So this is about perception. Perception is important. Not only we have to do a good job, we should be seen doing a good job. Next slide, please. So as I said before, patient satisfaction. There was this study which came up some years ago. It is still very relevant. It came up in this study on headache. And this study showed that the best predictor for resolution of headache problems was the patient's perception that they were listened to. That is, they had an opportunity to tell their story. Just think about it for a minute. When a patient feels that they have been listened to, it gives satisfaction. And that is the skill that we have to learn and practice and improve upon so that we give them the feeling that they have been listened to. Next slide, please. A lot of medical errors happens due to poor communication. And some studies have shown that even up to 60 to 70% of medical errors were due to communication. And logically, if we improve our communication skills, the errors will come down. Next slide. It also has a financial outcome. Because of poor communication, there may be situations where the patient party sues the hospital, sues the medical personnel. It leads to a lot of litigation. All of this has a cost. And as a result, poor communication has a financial implication as well. Next slide. So why this is happening? It is happening because most of us are assessed. We are tested on our medical knowledge, on our ability to examine a patient and solve a problem. So those things are tested while we are getting educated.
Biju, Biju,
Yes,
Biju, please wait.
yes, yes.
Somebody is unmuted. Please mute yourself when the faculty is speaking. I request all of you to please.
Shall we proceed?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes. So usually we are tested on our knowledge on the medical subject or the nursing subject and our skills, either medical skills or nursing skills, or our ability to solve the medical problems. But we are usually not tested on our communication knowledge, communication skills. And unfortunately, in many parts, especially in India, uh, proper structured communication training program is not inculcated, it's not part of our regular medical and nursing training program. Some places have it, but it is not uniform, it is not structured, it is not there everywhere. So that is why, since it is not taught to us, we are our deficiency comes in those areas. So whether you're a doctor or a nurse or any other kind of healthcare professional, you may be very knowledgeable about your area of work. You may be very skillful. However, if your ability to communicate is not up to mark, the level of satisfaction goes down. And that is where the crux of the matter is, how the patient or the patient party perceives us, how we are able to give satisfaction. Next slide. So, in a doctor patient relationship or nurse patient relationship, effective communication is very important, not only to get a good diagnosis, because good history taking leads to good diagnosis, it also leads to better patient compliance. For example, there was one patient situation I remember where a patient and family came to meet me looking for a pain doctor. They said they have severe pain in the leg and they want to see a pain doctor. And when I saw this patient, he had a very severe gangrene. a situation which immediately needs a surgeon to you know uh, uh, do some surgery. So I told them this is gangrene and this needs to be seen by a surgeon. And then they told me that they went to a surgeon first, and the surgeon took one look at the leg and said that the leg had to be amputated. And they said that we ran away from that place and we came to see whether we can get some pain relief. So I explained to them that, see, because there is gangrene, there is going to be poison which is coming into your system. And beyond the point, if there is too much of poison in your body, you can even die because of that. So the surgeon asked, rather, the surgeon told about cutting off that part to save your life. That is why the surgeon told that that part of the leg had to be amputated. So once they understood why the surgeon said what the surgeon said, they went back to the surgeon. So it is very important to communicate properly. Only then can you expect compliance from the patient. And only if you have good compliance will you have good outcome. And when you get good outcome, you will have a satisfied patient and family. And when we have happy patient, satisfied patient, it will also affect us. We will feel very happy and satisfied. The tension within the team also comes down. Everybody feels good. Good communication is also important as far as the patient safety is concerned. And if we take care of safety, a lot of litigation also comes down. Remember, mistakes can happen. We are all human beings, but we have to reduce the mistakes by being effective communicators, not only with the patient and family, but also among ourselves. Next slide. So, coming to this question, why should we learn medical communication? Just give a thought to it, and please send in your ideas on the chat. You can just type uh, one word, two word answers and let them come in. We will proceed with the presentation, but do send in your ideas on chat, and we will read them uh, in between. So moving on, next slide. So what is there in it for us professionals, doctors, nurses, and others? When we are better communicators, as I said earlier, the compliance with the management will improve. So when doctor says something and the same message is given by the nurse, so the perhaps the understanding gets better. And as a result, if we work as a team, we give the same message and in a way that patients and families understand, the compliance can improve. And when compliance improves, we can expect better outcome. And when there's better outcome, we'll have a happy patient and family, and we have a happy doctor, nurse, and hospital. And this is important to improve relationship between us healthcare providers as well as the uh, uh, people outside, the general public and healthcare professionals. And when we have good relationship, the stress will come down. Remember, it's everything about good relationship. And also, when we are good communicators, we will improve professionally, and our professional achievements will also improve. Whether you're a doctor or a nurse or any kind of healthcare providers, people will give feedback to the management that so and so person was very good to me, and as a result you can expect your professional achievements to improve. I'm seeing some very good comments coming. Hopefully in between Sunil can stop and read out some of those comments which are coming in. Whenever Sunil wants, you can do that, please. Moving on, next slide. So, what is there for the patient and family? Once we communicate properly, it reduces uncertainty. People understand what is happening, and people understand that sometimes we may not have the proper answer, because, after all, biology is not an exact science like mathematics. In maths, 1 plus 1 is always 2, but in biology, it may not be, right? Even our fingerprints are different. Not one human being's fingerprint is same as the other person. So biology is not an exact science. So we have to communicate honestly. This is what is happening right now. We hope this is the outcome, but it is also possible that the outcome may not be that good also. So we have to communicate properly so that people can understand what is going on and they are mentally prepared for some bad outcomes or some uncertain outcomes. And once they understand what is going on, it gives them a sense of direction, it gives them a sense of purpose. They know how to go, where to go, what to do, who to go and meet, etc., etc. So it gives a clarity on how to proceed. And also it is very important that for the patient and party, that they are able to plan ahead, because remember, in most parts of the world people don't have health insurance. Many places people have to find their own resources for the health care. Sometimes they may have to sell something, or take a loan, or something like that, for providing health care. So all of this doesn't happen very fast, you have to plan for it. So all of those things also helps the patient and family. Next. So generally, when we talk about healthcare, there's a lot of misconception among the public. Many times people think that if you have enough money to spend, and if you go to the best hospital with all the latest technology, everything can be taken care of. And we know that it is not true. Most of the diseases known to modern medicine are not treatable. We can at best try to control it. For example, diabetes cannot be cured. We try to control it, and we control it very well, and people have a good quality of life for 30, 40 years, no problem. But ultimately people will have complication of diabetes, diabetic retinopathy, neuropathy, cardiomyopathy, nephropathy, stroke, mi, all of these things will happen, and ultimately people will die of it. So all of these things are important for us to understand, but many a times the common man is not able to understand all of that. So it is very important that we healthcare professionals uh, make this information available to the public, one person at a time, one person who comes in contact, we can educate them. Why I'm saying that is because unrealistic expectation is something that we can never meet. We can only work according to what is really possible. So realistic expectation we have to give, but unrealistic expectation we have to remove. Only then can we work properly, and only then we can build a sense of trust with general society, with patients and family. Otherwise there is always going to be a friction. So for good harmonious relationship between healthcare professionals and the rest of the world, it is important that we communicate better and we make people understand what is going on. And it is very important to cut out the medical jargon. See, the medical jargon is okay when we are talking among ourselves, but when we talk to people who are non-medical people, they may be highly educated, but they are still illiterate as far as medical part is concerned. They may be lawyer or chartered accountant or anybody, doesn't matter. So what is the literacy of another person is immaterial. If they are not from the medical field, they will not understand the medical jargon. So it's very important to talk to people in a simple language that they can understand. Keep it short, simple, and clear is the best way of going about it. And as most of the people are putting in trust, we definitely have a trust deficit. So good communication will improve trust. It will build a bridge between the healthcare professionals and the rest of the world. And trust is something that we have to learn to earn. It just does not happen like that. We have to earn it. Next slide.
So Biju,
Yes.
there are some comments, and the common theme is trust. So
Please proceed.
the most important thing between the patient and healthcare workers is trust. And if you are able to communicate properly, that will automatically come. And somebody told that is the basic aspect for medical care, and it will also help to reduce the stress. That is very important. for medical as medical professionals, if you communicate properly to the patient and family, you are relieved up to an extent. In my case also, if I don't communicate with family properly, then i I think I always face some problems. So I make it a point to communicate properly with the patient and family. So that's also an important stress reliever, proper communication. Yeah, Vito.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Excellent comments coming in, and keep them coming. And whichever topic we are dealing with, if you have a comment, please come. Please let them come in, and Dr. Sunil will screen them, and we will talk about it. In bit, we'll take a small break in the session, and we'll have this, and then we'll resume the session. So, resuming the session now. So, we will talk about some of the barriers that we see in communication. There can be a lot of barriers. I'll just summarize it to one or two areas. Next slide. So, one of the area, next, next, one more, I think. No, go back, please. Yeah, thank you. So, one of the areas, environment or miscellaneous barrier. It could be the lack of time that we usually have. So we should know how to manage our time better. Remember, time management is a team sport. It is not just one person has to manage time. It is how we distribute our workload among our team, and everybody pulls together so that we can do a good job in the limited time we have. It is just like how we do triaging in the emergency when there's a lot of people who are uh, who are brought in a mass trauma, and how we triage them. Same thing, same principle we can apply in a busy OP or a busy inpatient admission. Lack of privacy, we have to create some barriers so that privacy, or at least an illusion of privacy, is created. And we have to sometimes remove a lot of physical barriers so that there is an easy access. For example, if our consultation table is overloaded with things, and the patient and the doctor is having a lot of things in between them, it will create a barrier. Or if you're a nurse and your nursing station is becoming a barrier to the your interaction with the patient, so it is best thing you invite them in to the nursing station, give them a chair to sit and talk if it is required, or you can stand up and interact with them when they come for a short request. A lot of noise in the ambient noise can be a distraction. Nowadays we all carry mobile phones. Sometimes in the hospital we have overhead announcements happening from time to time. So all of these things can be a barrier. Some of the barriers you have to learn to live with, some barriers you can try to modify. And technology nowadays, a lot of technology is being used in, because of corona, social distancing. Even our class today, we are not doing it face to face in one place, we are doing on the net, and people are from joining in from various parts of the world. So this is technology is coming into our lives. But remember, not everybody is tech savvy. Many of our patients may not know how to use technology, or they may have physical problems which prevents them from using technology to communicate. So we should try to help out people in whatever best way we can if there's a technological barrier involved. Next slide. Now, some of the patients or their families can be a barrier. Sometimes the patient may be so timid in nature, they may be so afraid of us that they may not, explain all their problems to us. They may think that we are very busy. They may think, how can I tell my non-medical problem, my financial problem, my social problems to them? What will they think of me, etc., etc. Sometimes the family can be a barrier. They may prevent the patient from explaining everything, and instead they may start telling the patient's problem to the doctor or the nurse. And for every question that a doctor or nurse puts to the patient, instead of the patient answering, the family answers. So sometimes that can be a barrier for the patient to effectively communicate. And some of the patients may have diseases. For example, a patient with a stroke may have aphasia or dysarthria and may find it very difficult to talk. So there can be multiple reasons from the patient or the family side which can act as a barrier to communication. Next slide. And can we be barriers? Just I would love to hear what your thoughts are on the chat. Can we be barriers? I believe so. So let us talk about it. Next slide. So nowadays, especially with this corona issue, we are all wearing masks and trying to cover up as much as possible. So some even before that, when people used to see doctors and nurses, they used to feel, uh, if not scared, at least less comfortable. Because as I said, who wants to come to the hospital? Only if you're sick and tired and suffering, you come to the hospital. And when they see doctors and nurses, many times just seeing them increases their blood pressure. Uh, and nowadays, our appearance is becoming even more frightening. And because of all this covering up, our facial expression, we may be smiling behind the mask, but our smiles may not be that clearly visible. So it creates a lot of barrier. How our appearances can create a lot of barrier. So unfortunately, we can't remove the mask. We need to use our steps. We need to wear our uniform, but we have to modify our body language. We have to modify our body language. We'll talk about it later. Good body language, and yes, as Regina uh, Opoku, I hope I'm pronouncing it correct, mentioned good body language and tone of voice is very, very important. We'll talk more about it. Next, our attitude. Okay. Uh, Regina Opoku Mensha, right. Uh, so um, uh, our attitude, I did not think about it. Communication is not important. I have other things to do. So if our attitude towards communication is like this, then we will never be good communicators. We have to have a different attitude, that we have to become good communicators. Yes. Next slide, please. And the major problem, as I said earlier, is that we are taught medicine, nursing, physiotherapy, pharmacy, everything we are taught. But communication skills, structured training program in communication is not available in all places. And that is why our lack of training. How do we manage time? Many people say, I am very busy. Communication skill should uh, earn you more time. It should not lose time. A good communicator saves on time, energy, and effort. So actually, if you are having a very busy schedule, then you need to learn good communication because it will save time. So communication is not about wasting time. It is about saving time. It is about saving energy. It's about saving effort and getting good outcomes. And that is why, that is the whole idea of good communication. And how will we convey complex medical information in simple way? That will come only with good communication skills. And how do you communicate bad news? And how do you manage collusion where the family tells the doctor or the nurse, please don't reveal this bad news to the patient? How do you manage that? And how do you deal with somebody who's angry, somebody who's angry outside the op, angry inside the ip, angry outside the icu, angry outside the emergency department? How do you deal with that kind of anger? So a lot of communication skills is required there. Next slide. So those are some of the barriers that I wanted to touch upon. There are more. It is not just all of those things that I mentioned. There can be more number of barriers, but I just wanted to touch on some of the few barriers. Sunil, would you like to come in and make any comments on the barriers?
Uh, no, Vishnu, I think there are no much comments in the chat box also. So
Okay.
just understand that we can also become barriers many times. And this is what happens mainly in hospitals. We are the main barriers for communication, and we don't have time. We don't have our body language is not good, our tone of voice is not good. So non-verbally we are communicating that we are not approachable. So many problems occur because of us. So we have to be conscious about that.
All right.
Thank you, Vishal.
Thank you. Thank you, Sunil. So we will proceed. Now we will come to some do's and don'ts. Next slide, please. Okay. So even if you're wearing a mask and a goggle and whatever it is, you still need to make eye contact. So one of the problem is that if you don't make eye contact, it shows in your body language. And as a result, your the first connection between two human beings is through eye contact. And always make eye contact when you talk to people. And even if you're wearing a mask, smile behind the mask, because when you smile behind the mask, it will be seen in your eyes. The smile is seen in your eyes, and it will be heard in your voice. So even if your actual smile is hidden behind the mask, your smile, a part of your smile will be seen in your eyes, and it will be heard in the voice. It will be heard in your voice. So don't think that smiling behind the mask is a waste of energy, waste of time. It will create a positive energy even if you are wearing a mask. It is may not be as effective without a mask, but even if you're wearing a mask, it still has a lot of positive value. So always make eye contact and smile. Next slide. Do not categorize or label people. Uh, while I was doing some file work at one of the nursing station, it was the time when there was handing over going on. So there were small groups of nurses, those who had just joined to the shift, and then there were others who were leaving the shift. So there was a handing over process going on, and I overheard. This was in Malayalam, but since not there are not much Malayalam speakers, I'll translate it into English. What I overheard was, room number 432. The patient is a big scratch. that that is the handing over going on. So what is going on is that room number, beware, room number 432, there is a patient who is a big scratch, is a very irritating patient. So when we categorize somebody like that, then the person who has not even seen the patient will have it in the mind that that patient is trouble. So we all, within our 24 hours, sometimes we are scratchy, sometimes we are happy, sometimes we are sad, sometimes we are anxious, sometimes we are generous, sometimes we are mean. It all happens all within 24 hours. We can be everything. That does not mean we are only scratchy, only happy, only sad, only mean. No, we are all of that. So are our patients and their families. So for God's sake, don't label or categorize people as a VIP patient, or the patient's bystander is a doctor, or the patient is a retired matron, and all that kind of labeling should go. Just say that this is Mrs. So and so, has been admitted with so and so problem and is being evaluated for so and so. These are the results that are expected to come, and etc., etc., etc. Whatever you do normally, handing over, etc., do it, but don't label people. And also, don't be judgmental on people. Oh, so and so is from this area, so must be this kind of character. So it is, we judge people even before we know them. So that we have to do away with. We have to accept people as they are and respect people for what they are. That person may be a fisherman, and you may be one big doctor or one very important head nurse in the hospital. Doesn't matter. That person is respectable as much as you are. So it is important not to be judgmental. And look at the body language of this healthcare provider sitting uh, with that young patient. Remember, even children deserve respect. and it is shown in the body language. When you are dealing with children, whether they are sitting on bed or sitting on a chair, never bend from your hips, because when you bend from your hip, you are towering over them. So like they are a small person and you are a big person and you're looking down on them. So it is important that you bend at the knee so that your head is at the level of the child. So it is you are bringing your body at equal position to the child, whether the child is sitting on a chair or standing on the floor or sitting on a bed. Don't bend from the hip, bend from the knee. And that is the good position, so that doctor or a nurse, whoever that person is showing with the body position that you and I are equal, right? So that is how you show respect to people. And if the person is an adult, if they are on the bed and lying down, you can pull up a chair or a stool and sit there. When you take your BP or you want to take blood samples, so when you sit down, you create equality. And when you are standing and the other person is lying down, or when you're standing and the other person is sitting, or when you're sitting at the nursing station and somebody comes and stands at the other side, there is no equality. So if you have to position your body in the same way of the other person, so same position creates a sense of equality and respect, and that creates a sense of satisfaction. Next slide. Don't leading questions. Your pain is better, isn't it? So when one very important looking nurse comes for rounds and the nurse says, your pain is better, isn't it? Sometimes the patient may be so scared that they will not say, no, my pain is not getting better, your medicine is not helping me. They may not be able to say that. Some patients may be able to say because they are already coming from an empowered background, but many people may find it difficult to say when you say as a leading question, your pain is better now, isn't it? So that way, when you say, you may or may not get the right answer. So or ask in an open-ended way. How are you today? How is your pain today? And then you will get a good answer. Ask in terms of how, what, when, where, why, who. So ask open-ended question. Don't ask a leading question. Next slide. Do not minimize your patient's problem and do not compare your patient's problem. When you say your pain, this is nothing, this is such a small problem. Remember, for everybody, their problem is the biggest problem. So when you minimize somebody's problem, then the satisfaction goes down. And when you compare one person's problem with another person, oh, you are behaving like this, look at the children's ward, they are even more courageous than you. As I said earlier, everybody, their own problem is the biggest problem in the world. When you compare their problem with somebody else's problem, whether that comparison is right or wrong, that is not the point. When you compare somebody's problem with another person, you are showing that they are less, than their satisfaction will come down. So it is important not to minimize or compare. Then what should you do? You have to acknowledge. Okay, anybody in your position would perhaps feel the way. You as a nurse, you as a doctor may be seeing this day in and day out. For you, it is not a big deal. But for that person, it's a big deal. So acknowledge it. Anybody in your position would perhaps feel this way. And you as a doctor or as a nurse, uh, you may think this is really not such a big problem, but still, do not normalize the problem. Normalize their emotional experience. Don't say this is nothing, this is just normal. Say how you are feeling right now is perhaps normal. Anybody in your position would perhaps feel the same way. So don't normalize the problem, normalize their emotional experience. Acknowledge their emotional experience. That is how we can improve their trust. That is how we can give them better satisfaction. Next slide, please. Do not give false hopes. Don't worry, I'm there. We'll take care of everything. What if we are dealing with an incurable medical condition? What if we are dealing with the financial problems of the patient, because of which they are not able to undergo a surgery? What if they can't pay for the surgery? And you're saying, don't worry, I will take care of everything. So when you give words like that, that false hope, the people will understand that you are just saying something. That's all. Most important thing is listen to them, listen to their problems, understand what their problems are, ask them what exactly is your problem, why you are not uh, willing for surgery, and why you're not willing for this treatment, why you are feeling so sad, why are you feeling so scared. When you ask them, they will tell you the reason. I don't have money to feed my family, how can I find money to get this surgery done? I'm scared that I'm okay about this cancer. I know I'm going to die. I'm not scared about that, but I'm scared I will be in severe pain because I've seen my uncle dying in severe pain. So these are the way we find out what exactly are the concerns, and there may be many concerns which we can give realistic hope. I'll make sure that you don't suffer in pain. We can do it, and there are some things which we can't do anything about. For example, we can't take care of the financial problems of our patients and families, so we'll just have to listen to it. But listening is also therapeutic, because when we allow people to ventilate, when we allow people to talk about their problems, we allow them a little peace of mind, a little calming of the mind, a little healing, and that itself is very, very therapeutic. So listening has a lot of value, not only in knowing more information, but also as healing. Even if we can't take care of the problems, listening to the problems has its own value. Next slide. Do not assume. Do not assume. You know, this is the most common problem that we practice. When somebody says, I'm so scared, don't worry, we are all there with you, don't worry, everything will be taken care of. And only if you asked, and as I mentioned before, I don't have enough money to feed my children, how can I pay for the surgery? And then what's the value of you saying the good words, don't worry, I'm there for you, I'll take care of everything? Those are just empty words. So it's very important. Do not assume. Ask people. Ask what their concerns are, and then they will tell. And many a times when people tell their problems, we may have solutions. We may not have solutions. But listening to the problems is important. Next slide. Do not forget the human touch. Right now, we are very afraid of corona, and that's why we have stopped touching people. But you can put a gloves and touch the people, or you can carry a sanitizer with you everywhere in your coat pocket. And after touching, you can, in front of them, you can put some sanitizer in your hand and sanitize. That's okay. But don't forget to touch people, because there is nothing more therapeutic than a human touch. And equally important, as you take care of your patients and their families' worries, also take good care of yourself. Practice good self care. And some of the things you can practice is physical activity, which in the form of exercise or yoga or whatever, and mental activity in the form of some meditation, or some kind of activity which will help your mind become calm, and also indulge in some hobbies. Usually what happens is we get up in the morning, go for work, come back, and many a times, if you're a lady, you also have additional responsibility of household work. In some parts of the world, men are slowly try learning to contribute to household work, but in reality, most part of the world, that is very minimal. So women have to do double jobs, men usually do single job, which is their professional environment, and that's about it. We don't have any additional thing that we do, like you want to paint, you want to sing, or you just want to take a walk in the garden. Anything, do something which is different, and stay connected. When I say stay connected, it could be anything. You can stay connected to your friends, your family, your relatives. It could be staying connected with some group that you like, or you can get in touch with nature yourself. get in touch with God if you believe in God, or you can get in touch with and whatever your concept of the universe is, whatever. Have the sense of being connected. Don't feel you're isolated and alone in a storm. So all of these things we practice regularly so that you are physically and mentally and spiritually in a good position so that you can give good care to your patients and families. Okay, next slide. So now this is the last part I was coming to, how to take a history. We all have learned how to take history while we were young. We were young medical and nursing students. It is just kind of a small improvement I'm hoping to make. So first thing is greeting. So when the patient or the family comes in, you have to do a proper greeting. And greeting involves making an eye contact and smile. If you're wearing a mask, even then you smile and nod your head. Nod your head. All of these things are showing that you are welcoming the person. And then which whatever is appropriate in your area, you can say hello, good morning, namaste, namaskaram, or whatever is appropriate in your part of the world. And I'll be happy to see some of those uh, the local form of good morning or hello in your language. Just curious. I know there are many people from many parts of the world. How do you greet people? I'll be happy to see in the chat box. And then once the greeting is made, let's everybody get comfortable. It's important to be comfortable. So if you're sitting in your nursing station, or if you're a doctor, you're sitting in the OP, offer a chair to somebody who has come to speak to you. If you don't have a chair to offer, you stand up if they are standing. Otherwise, you offer them a chair. If you have gone for rounds and you are in the IP area, in the inpatient area, always pull up a chair or a stool, some place where you can sit by the patient while you are having the interaction. It could be a simple thing. For example, if you're a nurse, you may be taking a BP or you may be taking a temperature. While you are doing it, instead of standing, you can sit and do it. So when you sit, it creates a more nicer environment. People will feel that you are there for them when you sit down. So the sense of satisfaction improves if you sit down. Now, then we have to start the interview with an open-ended question. How can I help you? What brings you here? And or if you are in the IP, you can ask, how are you today? So you always start with an open-ended question. And once you have asked the question, then you listen. And when you listen, you do not interrupt. Let the person talk. And next slide. And when the person is talking, we have to encourage the person to keep talking. And how do we encourage? We maintain eye contact and we nod our head from time to time, showing the person that you are listening. And then you can make encouraging sounds like mm-hmm, okay, mm-hmm, and okay. So this kind of sounds encourages the person to talk and give more all the full information that the person wanted to. And in between, if you hear something that is not very clear, then you can clarify as you go along. Don't wait for the end. Ask them, what did you say? I did not hear properly. Or this is what I understood. Is that what you meant to say? Whatever it is, clarify along the way. And then ask them what they understand about their situation. You can ask them, what did the doctor tell you? What did you understand about your conversation with the team? Or what did the team in the other hospital tell you? What did they say? And what do you know about the reports? What is your understanding about all the tests you have been going on, have been doing? So all of these things you have to ask so that you understand what they understand, because you understanding what they understand is important, because that will be otherwise a blank spot. You need to understand. Also find out what their concerns are. You can ask them, so what are you concerned about? Do you have any concerns? Are you worried about something? Are you anxious about something? So you ask them, and sometimes they may be a little reluctant to tell it without you asking. Some people may tell their concerns even without you asking. But sometimes you will have to ask, only then people will feel that they have permission to speak about their concerns. Next slide. And once those and once you have all that information, and in case they're asking you about their situation, then you have to share that information honestly. You have to share the information honestly. And if you are not in a position to share the information, then you can tell them, I am not in a position to talk about this, but I will inform the concerned person, I'll inform my senior, uh, and that person will talk to you. But whatever it is, we will not give any false information. We will not lie to patient. Even if we can't tell the truth, we will not lie to the patient. And when we are sharing information honestly, make sure you use simple language, no medical jargon. So keep it simple, short, and clear. And honesty is the best policy. Discuss treatment options. Your doctor may have told them, but they still want to discuss with you. If you are a nurse and you have been taking care of that person, you have a good relationship with that person, and the person will say, the doctor told me so and so, what should I do, sister? And then you can tell them, see, this is what the doctor suggested, and this is the reason why the doctor suggested so and so and so. And then you can kind of help with the same messaging, so that they feel reassured. Because if you are a nurse and you are giving the same message as the doctor, the patient will have a lot of trust. Okay, the everybody is telling the same thing. And listen to their beliefs. People will have lot of beliefs. We as medical people, we study the medical things and we understand lot of scientific things, but the non-medical people have a lot of beliefs. For example, uh, I usually come across one belief that say, when you take radiotherapy you die. We know it is not true. We know that a lot of people who get radiotherapy are completely cured, and we know that there are a lot of people who have advanced malignancy. When they take radiotherapy, their life is extended, they get good relief from pain, etc., etc. But there is a belief that I come across that, oh my god, if I have been asked to take radiotherapy, I don't want to take radiotherapy, because I've heard that when you take radiotherapy you die. So then we have to talk to them. We have to first find out, why are you saying that. Then they may say, because there was one uncle in my friend's family who had something like that, and then they took radiation and he died. Then we ask, okay, what did the uncle have and what stage was he in. So slowly we try to uh, talk to them, and we do not challenge their beliefs straight away. No, 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 this is you are wrong. Nobody dies of radiation. But when we say things like that, they will only get more afraid, because we are not addressing their problem. Their belief is very very real for them. So when you contradict that and say, no, 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 then that is not. Do not laugh at people's belief. Do not disbelieve people's belief. For them it is real. So talk to them, explore, and get them to understand the reality in a more gentle manner. And once some decision, a medical decision has been taken, discuss this with the patient and family, and then help them come to a decision by consensus. We as medical people will have medical reasons for advising one line of treatment. But as for the patient and family is concerned, they may have some beliefs regarding that, or they may have some other issue. For example, they may have money issue related to that, or they may not have enough money, or they may be coming from very far off place. As a result, they cannot come and get admitted, or there may be some other problems. If, for example, there may not be a family member who can come and stay with the patient if admitted, or any number of things. So we have to take into consideration the problems from the patient side also. So we take medical consensus on the best line of treatment, and then we take the family and patient's opinion, and then we have to discuss and come to a consensus. And it is very important that many a times, in my experience, I have found out that when nurses are communicating with the patients and the family, they get more information than I do. And I'm very blessed to have a very well trained nurses, very well trained not only in the subject but also in communication. And as a result, a lot of my workload comes down because they will take care of a lot of problems, and then they will get a lot of information that I don't have. And then they will call me up and inform me, doctor so and so patients have this and so problem. And I said, oh my god, I had no idea about it. And as a result, I'm able to modify my plans for the patient based on the information. So please remember, it's a team sport. Our healthcare, we cannot do it in a single way. Doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, pharmacists, clinical pharmacists, everybody is important. And we all need to learn communication skills so that we can support each other. And once we have come to a conclusion, we summarize the interview. And next slide. And we discuss, confirm whatever the plan we are going on. And before you close the interview, ask them, is there anything else that you want to talk about? And this usually brings a smile on the people's faces, because we have discussed everything and we are about to stop the interview, they are about to leave, and just before they are leaving, you ask, is there anything else that you want to talk about? And that is such a nice way to close the interview, right? And then always give them some number that they can contact. If you don't want to give your personal number, do not give your personal number, that's okay, no problem. But give them some number, give them the department number or the hospital number, whatever, something, so that they have something in their hand before they leave. And that is how you close the interview, by leaving the door open. And once that part is also there, then we go back to the first part, that is greeting. This time, bye bye. So make eye contact, smile, nod your head. You can say bye bye, good day, namaste, etc., etc. And I'll be happy to see your local bye bye in whatever language you do it. Just for your curiosity, it will be good fun to know how you say goodbye in your area. Next slide. So, most important thing for all of us to understand, medical communication is not a talent. You don't have to be born communicator. You just need to learn it. Everybody can be a good communicator. We have to learn the structured way of communicating. Please don't think that today's session is a, this thing. It is just a small session. Communication skills is a vast area. It's a vast area of study and learning and practicing and skill enhancing. So this is just a small glimpse of what are the areas that we need to look into. Next slide. And I'll finish here because it is time. And hopefully next session, which is on 12th, we will try to cover communicating bad news, how to manage collusion, and how to deal with an angry person. So I think we will stop here, and I will give the baton back to uh, Sunil. Sunil, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Biju. So we have heard from Biju about basics of communication and what are the things which we need to be aware of, how we can build trust, and what are the needs of communication, what are the barriers of communication, how can we conduct an interview, what are the do's and don'ts in communication, etc. So if you have any doubts, you can ask a few questions now. Anybody?
I guess if everybody starts speaking together, it will be a bit chaotic, but maybe you can send in your questions on the chat box, and uh, we will try to answer as much as possible.
Regina has given a comment. I think this is for greeting. Makaye o Makie o. I don't know. Biju, Regina, what language is this?
And is it a good morning or a bye bye? Or does that work for both ways?
Yeah, it's
Greeting in
Ghana.
Ghana.
Yeah, Ghana.
Okay, okay.
Just good morning.
And I'll be, maybe it's interesting to hear how it is pronounced. Maybe if you can unmute yourself and just tell us how it is pronounced.
Okay, so it's pronounced Marche. That's
Ma-
good morning.
Mache.
Marche.
Mache.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes. You're welcome.
Anybody else? Yeah. Rosma, open greeting. Hi, Apa, Kabar, Hari in Malay. So it's difficult to read it.
I guess the best thing is that when we have something like that, it will be good to hear how it is pronounced.
Hai, apa kabar hari ini? Selamat tinggal dan jumpa lagi.
And that's a mouthful. I guess it will take some time to learn it, but it sounds very sweet.
Yeah, many comments are coming
Yes. Salamat.
already.
Namaskar.
Selamat pagi, selamat datang. Okay. Anybody else have any doubts regarding this question? We say salam. Salam. Um, so I think we will move on to patient story. Does Lakshmi? Can we?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay. So today's patient story will be presented by Regina from Ghana. Regina, it's over to you.
Hello.
Yes, Regina.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear
Yes.
you.
Okay, good morning. From Ghana, Kolebu Teaching Hospital. And I'm with the palliative care unit of the hospital. And today is on a female patient, age 63 years old, diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer to the liver. Okay, so on the day she came, her main complaints were pain in the ribs, right-sided. And then using the numerical pain scale, she scored her pain at 9. And then according to her, her pain had been there for 5 months. It had been on and off with no proper medications to help manage the pain. She also had edema, which had been there for 2 months, anorexia for 2 weeks, Rachel also scored 9/10. General malaise for a month, tiredness weeks. She was actually depressed. She scored 10/10. The depression and anxiety. Next slide, please. So, upon history taking, according to her, she said that she was in her usual state of health until 7 years ago when she felt an unusual mass in her right breast, which was very painful. And so she reported to one hospital in the Volta region of Ghana, the Royal Hospital, where she was seen and requested to do series of laboratory investigations, including a scan. And then found that there was a lump there in the breast, so it was removed. And then her condition improved. But a year after, she noticed during the follow-up visit, so she reported it, and then the surgeons removed that as well. So after investigations, more labs were conducted. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, but then later she was diagnosed with cancer and then started on chemotherapy there, where she received 5 cycles and also radiotherapy for 20 days. A year ago, during her follow-up visit, after several investigations, she was told that the cancer had spread to the liver. And so, according to her, they said there was nothing more they could do. So they asked her to come over to the palliative care unit so that we could help her with the money. Next slide, please. Okay, so there at our place, we examined her, an elderly woman, 63 years of age. She was looking ill, very weak, in a wheelchair when she came, but she's able to communicate and is well oriented to person, place, time. She could tell where she was and all that. She was also not in any obvious respiratory distress. She had edema. Sorry, please, sorry. So she had edema of both legs, and then she was jaundiced and was pale as well. But all her vital signs, their blood pressure, pulse, temperature, were all within normal ranges. Okay, so after we saw her, based on what we had, we thought we would do further investigations and then get to know the actual thing that was going on. So we requested that she does a full blood count. Our main this target was to know how her blood level was, the HB. And then we also did a liver function test, a renal function test, to know readings for the BE and creatinine and all. And then CT scan of the head was also requested, a chest X-ray, because she complained she had been coughing for some time. So we had to do a chest X-ray as well. And then we tested her for malaria too. The treatment included chemotherapy, radiation. We gave her analgesics for her pain, and then an anti-malarial treatment because her malarial test came out positive, 2 classes actually. So we started treating her and for the malaria. And then the results for the full blood count also showed that she had a low HP, a low blood level of 7.4. And then, I mean, she was visibly pale. So the doctors requested that we transfuse her. So she actually received 2 units of blood. Next slide, please. So the psychosocial aspect, we used the acronym FIFE, FIFE. And then the first F stands for the fear. So according to her, she's afraid that she is going to die from the illness. So due to that, and then whenever you ask her anything about it, she will cry. And then concerning the ideas, she also said that she really has no idea how the whole illness began. So she really didn't know what was going on or how it all happened. And then according to the caregiver, the relatives that came with her, we also noted that the sickness had affected her activities of daily living. And then she had to be assisted with everything because she couldn't walk, she couldn't get up to the washroom, she couldn't feed herself. Everything had to be done for her virtually. She had to be taken care of by her family, especially the close siblings. And then her expectations, the last year, her expectations were that she would be able to get up and walk again so that she could go about her normal duties at home and then at work. But she was hoping that she could get up and work and then go about her normal duties. Please let's move on. So the medications, like I said before, her HB was low. We had 7.4 gram per DL. So we transfused her with 2 units of the first visit. She went home and then 2-3 days later, she started vomiting and then feeling weak. She couldn't eat at all compared with like what she was taking previously. So we requested that the relatives, so that was when she was actually transfused with the 2 units of blood. And then we added syrup tortima, 1 ounce BD for 30 days to help with boosting the blood. And then she was put on morphine 5 milligram 4 hourly to help with the pain. We also gave bisacodyl tablet 15 milligram nocte for constipation that we were expecting the morphine to cause. And then while on admission, she wasn't taking anything at all compared with when she was at home. She refused her meals and all that. So doctors also added Parentrovit 1 and 2, the IV, added to dextrosaline for a 24-hour period just to see how it will help her. And then we also put her on tab dexamethasone 8 milligram. So we started from 8 milligram and then we tapered it down. So 8 milligram every day for 7 days. And then afterwards 6 milligram for 5 days. Then 4 milligram for another 5 days. And then lastly 2 milligram alternate days for the next 5 days as well, due to her score. And then we added omeprazole 20 milligram every morning for anticipated gastritis from the dexamethasone. We know it causes some gastritis when you take dexamethasone, some abdominal discomfort and all that. So at my unit, we usually add omeprazole to their treatment to help with that. And then we also added vitamin C, the dispersible one, to also help boost her immunity to be able to fight the illness. And then, as I mentioned earlier on, she tested positive for the malaria. So she was started on IV artesunate. We usually use that here, 120 milligram for a period of 24 hours in 3 doses. So you give the first dose at the first at 12 hours later you give the second dose, and then in the on the 24th hour you give the last dose. So she's receiving 23 doses within the 24 hours. So
Sister Regina, can you hear us? Hello? Anorexia and therefore is unable to eat, pain at the right ribs which makes sitting uncomfortable, bipedal edema coupled with weakness. Sister Regina,
Hello.
yes. Sister, we started your presentation. We reached till depression and anxiety. Can you continue from there? Hello?
Yes, please. Yes. So other. Hello. Please,
Yes,
can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So her main concerns were the fact that she was unable to eat, and then she wanted to also be pain free. Because due to the pain she was having in her ribs, it was also making sitting very difficult for her. So most of the time she had to lean in the seat or to lie on the bed, which was also very uncomfortable for her. She also had edema of both legs and then coupled with weakness in the legs. So it also made walking very difficult for her. And then the other concern was also that she was depressed and anxious. That we noticed when we were um, taking the history from her. We realized that she was very depressed and then anxious because she was crying any time about her condition and all that. And then productive. So that was also actually disturbing because sometimes she would eat and due to the cough, she would even vomit it out. And then the last thing was that she was anemic, like we discussed before. So she was also managed for that, for the anemia. So client was seen in an outpatient clinic initially. The symptoms were managed, and then she was educated on the illness and the medications that were given. And then 4 days later, she was rushed to the emergency unit with complaints of vomiting, and then anorexia again, generalized body seizures, which were involving the whole body and lasted between 15 to 20 seconds and was self-aborted. I mean, she had the seizure just for that period. The seizure did not recur, so we didn't think it was necessary to give her medications for that. I mean, but then as a result of that, we also suspected that probably there could be a met to the brain or something. So we requested that a CT scan be done so that we will know what was actually going on in the brain. And then if there was metastasis to the brain, we will know what to do. Or if there was any bleeding or whatever it could be, we would manage it as it was. So, like I mentioned before, the results of the FBC proved that her HB was low, but then the chest X-ray and the CT scan, we really did not receive the results. And then she passed on a week after we saw her. Very unfortunately, the relatives called me one evening while I was at home that she had passed on. So then we had to console her and then talk to her on all that, but everything is fine now. So at that first improved her quality of life as palliative care workers or nurses. In what ways could we improve her quality of life? And then secondly, in what ways can we offer help and support to her family that is involved in her care? And the third thing is that do you think the patient's condition and prognosis was effectively communicated to her, and why? For were there any
Hello? Sister Regina?
communication, and then caregiver of so hello, thank you.
So thank you, Sister Regina. There were some problems with the internet connection. So there was some problem while you were reading out the case history, but it's okay. So let's ask the participants. Would you like to ask any doubts regarding this patient story? Do you have anything to ask Regina regarding this?
Yeah, so the only before the patient passed on. So I submitted my slides, and then 2 days later, like I said, I was informed that the patient had passed on. So that's very unfortunate. I couldn't add it to the slide. But we have actually spoken with the relative. They are doing well.
Okay, Regina. Anybody has any doubts regarding this patient story? So, Regina, what was the cause of the seizure in this patient?
Please come again.
What was the cause of seizure?
Yes. Actually, it wasn't known.
Okay.
The truth is that the patient was brought to the emergency unit in the evening around 7 o'clock p.m.
Mhm.
So I spoke with the doctor on duty, and
Mhm.
then according to her, she came in with the seizures which were aborted on its own. So she was then now carrying out the investigations to actually know what was going on. So the cause actually was not established. Yes.
Uh, could it be due to malaria?
Yeah, it's likely, yes, because her malaria test came out positive. So yes, you are right. It could have been from the malaria.
So I think Biju has to go by 4:30. So let's ask Biju about to give us some comments on the questions that you have raised.
Yes, thank you, Sister Regina, for that good presentation. And the internet going off in between was typical of the
Yeah.
problems we talked about. Technology becoming a barrier to communication. So that's a right living example of that. And I was wondering uh, regarding this questions that you have put up. Do you think the patient's condition and prognosis was effectively communicated to her? And do you think the patient's caregiver and family could have been prepared effectively for her death? So, Sister Regina, just enlighten me. What was the understanding of the patient about uh, the medical condition? What was it that the patient knew about the medical condition? How much did they know? And the same question will apply for the family
Okay,
also.
so
How much did they know? How much did they understand, according to you?
okay, per my assessment, I realized that they knew very little about her condition. Initially, all they could say was that they had been told she had a cancer, but they really didn't know that we like they thought we were going to be able to cure her, because the doctors at the radiotherapy unit asked them to come to the palliative care clinic to be seen. And so they thought that, oh, once we've been asked to come here, these people are going to help her recover. But then I had to explain to them what cancer was, and then like how it worked. And then we had to try and then make them understand that we weren't actually going to cure her, but we were going to manage her symptoms and all those that were making her feel uncomfortable, like the pain and all that. So on the first visit, they actually got the understanding that though she wasn't well and she wasn't going to be cured, there was something that could be done for her to make her comfortable until probably she finally passes out. So they knew a
Okay.
little about the condition, but not much. Yeah.
Okay. No, that is good information you have given. And so the how well this has been communicated will depend on the outcome. When the patient died, how did the family react?
Yeah.
Were they accepting of the death? Did they understand that she was going to die? And when they died, were they accepting of the death? Or were there's a lot of stress for you and your other colleagues when that happened?
Yes. So when the relatives called me and told me about her death, um in fact, the truth is the man was okay because we had already communicated with him and then made him understand that she couldn't be cured. And then we didn't mention that she was going to die, but then we make them understand that because her disease was advanced, anything could happen at any time. Nobody knows when someone is going to die. We are not God. It's only God who would decide when she would pass away. But then we made them understand the fact that the disease could lead her into that. And so whenever it happens, they were ready to accept it. So when she died and they called me, I asked the man how he was feeling and all that, and he was like, "Oh, I'm okay." She was going through a lot of pain, and then I understand that she couldn't be cured. So now that she's even no more, we understand that it's part of the things, and then we thank God for everything. So it wasn't really, they didn't really give me a tough time when it comes to the bereavement thing, because they actually had accepted it. And then they knew something like that would happen. Though they didn't think it would happen that soon, but they knew it would happen. So it was okay for them.
Oh, I must say you did an excellent job. Congratulations, Sister Regina, and your
Thank
team
you,
over there.
sir.
Aha. Because the way you
Thank
have
you.
described it, excellent. Yeah. So I will hand over back to Sunil.
Thank
And
you, sir.
Sunil, I would like to be excused because my time is up and my clinical duties called me. I hope that is okay.
Okay, Biju. Thank you. So, were there any barriers to effective communication? Uh, so this also, Sister Regina need to be enlightened us regarding this. If you have not properly communicated to the patient and family, there will be some barriers. But from what you have told, we understand that you have communicated it to the family and made them understand that the disease is progressive. And even though you did not use the word death, they were able to understand that she could die at any moment. So I think that was good. And probably from that aspect of communication, there were no barriers. But were there any barriers, Regina? Mr. Regina? Sorry, she
Sir,
might
I
have
think
some.
we have lost her, sir.
Yeah, okay. So, in what ways we can improve her quality of life? So, anybody from the participants can answer this question? What ways we can improve her quality of life? Anybody? So quality of life is decided by the patient. Quality of life, which I think for me will not be the same for you. Suppose if I am bedridden, uh, the quality of life which I expect may not be the same as that of you when you are bedridden. So it is different for different people. So we have to ask the patient, what is the quality of life that you are trying to achieve, and then only we can improve the quality of life. Definitely, the patient had pain, so that might be one of the factors which we can correct. But we also ask the patient what are the other problems that you are facing. We haven't had anything about the family of this patient regarding her sons or daughters, her husband, etc. So she might have some concerns regarding this. We are not sure. So we have to explore the problems that the patient is facing and ask the person what is the quality of life that you are expecting, and then you have to work to solve those problems that the patient is facing. And it is the uh, same for family also, because when the family is looking after the patient, they are going through many suffering. So um, so what happens? The family will be going through uh, sometimes through physical problems, because the patient need physical help, maybe to take them to bathroom. Even they are unable to sit up, so the family has to do all these activities. So maybe physically they may be suffering. Maybe the family member might have a back pain, which might be aggravated by helping the patient physically. So they might need some uh, physical help from the psychosocial point of view. The patient is already depressed. From Regina's presentation, we can see that the scale is 10 by 10. Patient is also anxious. So by seeing this anxiety and depression, this will reflect on the family also. So the family will also be going through a lot of psychological problems. So it is our duty to support the family for this. Um, and if they have a financial problem, which we don't know how much financial problems are they facing, are they able to go for job, are they employed? Because of this patient condition itself, they may not be able to go out and earn money. So all this we have to find out from the family, and we have to do something which is possible for them. But it is, uh, even though we are unable to do much on the financial aspect, we may be able to support them through their psychosocial and spiritual suffering. So that's what we can do to help this patient's family. So uh, I think uh, we have to actually find out the problem from the patient and the family. What are the problems they are facing, and then we have to solve those problems to improve the quality of life of patients and families. And Sister Regina and her team were able to communicate properly with the patient and family, and they accepted the fact that okay, because of her progressive illness, she died. Uh, so that was a plus point because they were able to communicate it properly to the family, and probably she was pain free also. So the family was. The patient was not facing much problems or issues during the death also. So that is the summary regarding this patient story. Sister Regina, would you like to add anything else? Or anybody else want to add anything?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sorry, please. I had network issues, so I went off a bit. But
Yeah.
please, can I have the question again?
Now, do you want to add anything else to what we have discussed?
Okay, yeah. So you were talking about the financial issue. So we assessed that, and then for she herself, she didn't really have much, but her brother was the one supporting her financially. So he was buying all her medications and paying the hospital bills and everything. And then also she was on health insurance.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Insurance was also supporting her. So basically that is what I would like to add.
Mm. Okay. Her husband and children?
Hello.
Yeah, Sister Regina.
Yes, sir.
What about her husband and children?
Yes, yes. She has one child, a daughter who is 24 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to live with she used to be with her father, but when the disease started, she moved with her mother to her uncle's place. So as at the time we were seeing her, the patient together with her daughter were living in their brother's house, because where she is coming from is very far. And then at a point when the disease spread to the lungs, she had to be brought to Korle Bu Teaching Hospital here. She had to be referred here so that she could have chemotherapy and then radiation therapy and all that done for her. And then her brother lives here in the capital. So then they moved from their place to their brother's home so that they can easily access healthcare and also have her brother taking care of her and supporting her. So
Okay. Thank you, Sister Regina. And I see
you're
there is
welcome.
comment from Sister Anisha Kaur. When my mom passed away 2 years ago, and there was severe lack of communication from the healthcare provider, there was this line of words that I'll never forget, and that sometimes was more pain than the fact of her passing itself. So it's truly appreciated. Okay, so that will be painful for you, Anisha. So sorry for that. And all of us understand the importance of giving proper information to the patient and family in a less painful way. But we should be able to communicate the truth to the patient and family also. So thank you all for your active participation, and thank you Biju and Sister Regina for presenting this patient story. Thank
You're
you all.
welcome, sir.
Thank you, sir, for facilitating this program. Thank you all for joining in. So we can see you next Monday with the continuation of communication classes. I have given the feedback link in the chat option. Give it a minute, do it, then only leave the meeting. Thank you all. We'll see you next Monday. Bye.